wife and tell her I can't make dinner at 7:30.
We find for the defendant on all counts.
Yes.
Success made Henry Turner's life perfect.
Give me a break, will you? I just want a pack of cigarettes.
Fate
Henry, I know you can hear me.
made it something more.
Cardiac arrest caused lack of oxygen to the brain. It's going to be a long, tough rehabilitation.
I'll be your physical therapist for the remainder of the evening.
All right. In some ways, he's starting from scratch here.
You're stepping like a natural man. Go ahead.
Little loop, cross over.
How did you learn to do that?
You taught me.
Such a shame. I mean, he was so good.
You've got a life back at home with friends and family and everything you could ever want.
They love you. They're gonna take care of you.
Well, I don't want them to take care of me, Bradley.
No, I don't like eggs.
What? Eggs are your favorite.
Okay, give me a lot of eggs.
Where were you?
I bought a dog.
Mom, look. Since you've come home, we haven't made love. If you're nervous or something.
Well, yeah, I'm a little nervous. Okay, well, we're really nervous.
You did it!
Are you my mother?
I can read.
It's not Henry I feel sorry for, it's Sarah.
This is Ajax.
Looks like she's got 2 kids now.
Dad, stop it.
I heard he's back at work.
Yeah, but doing what?
In this case,
East Shore Hospital, your famous last case.
what we did was wrong.
All we did is paying for our lunch.
I thought I could go back to my life, but I don't like who I was, Bradley.
You didn't like showing affection in public. It bothered you.
I don't mind so much anymore.
One minute you're an attorney, the next you're an imbecile.
That's not a very long trip. You can't let them hurt you, those people. They don't know you anymore.
I don't remember what I was like, Sarah.
Don't listen to nobody trying to tell you who you are.
We were in love once, years ago, and then we weren't, not for a long time. But we're better now. Please don't walk away. Not now.
Harrison Ford. A Mike Nichols film. Regarding Henry.
Well, hey everybody, what's going on? I am back again with another movie review, and I'm going to be discussing the 1991 drama film Regarding Henry. And this here is the imprint Blu-ray. It got a good 1080p high definition presentation. You have a commentary with the film critic. We'll just call him Peter T, since his last name's kind of hard to pronounce. Then you got several interviews with the cast members, though I will say they're archive interviews, and you have a trailer. But at least you get some features on this Blu-ray here. I believe before then, this film has never been released on Blu-ray till maybe, I think it was either earlier this year or like the later part of last year. And last I know, it was on DVD. I don't think it had any features. If it did, it had a trailer, and that's how pretty much treated their films. And then maybe someday down the road, a few years later, they'll do like a special edition or special collector's edition, because they like to be greedy, and I don't want to get on that diatribe. But anyways, the film itself I definitely enjoy. I like how the film kind of explores, what happens when you suffer a traumatic event and how do you kind of recover from that process, whether it be physical and mental. And in this case, for the film, it's both. So I like how the film kind of touches upon that aspect. And getting into our film cast and crew, I'll start with the typical crew. The film itself was directed by Mike Nichols. Before then, he did a film called Heartburn. He did Postcards from the Edge. After this film, he would go on to do a very underrated Jack Nicholson film called Wolf. He also did Primary Colors and so many other films. And believe it or not, the film's writer is Jeffrey Abrams, aka J.J. Abrams himself. This was, I believe, his first feature-length film that he wrote. I think he actually did a solid job. I think if he wrote films more like this, because after this film he would go on to write Forever Young with Mel Gibson. I really liked that film. I think if J.J. did more films like this, I think he'd be actually a solid writer for sure. But he decided to go into like the science fiction realm, and let's just say that's not his strong suit. But I don't want to focus on that aspect. And the film's producers were believe it or not, were Mike Nichols and Scott Rudin. The cinematography was done by a guy named, it's definitely Italian sounding, so we'll just call him GR. Giuseppe Rutono. I'm probably butchering his name, but I guess that's how he's pronounced. And the film was edited by Samuel Stanton, and believe it or not, the music was done by Hans Zimmer. He's done so many films, like he's done, the Batman, the Nolan trilogy. Before this film, he did films like Rayman, Black Rain, so on and so forth. And our cast members, we of course have Harrison Ford as Henry. We have Annette Bening as Sarah, and their last names are Turner. We also have Mikki Allen. I believe she's under a different name now, as Rachel Turner. And from what I understood, this was her only feature-length film. She never really did anything else after this. You also have Bill Nunn as Bradley, Henry's therapist. You have Rebecca Miller as Linda, who is one of Henry's co-workers in the lawyer firm. You have Bruce Altman as Bruce, who is apparently a friend and also a lawyer as well. Elizabeth Wilson as Jessica, who is Henry's secretary. You have Donald Moffat as Charlie Cameron, who is actually pretty much the Henry's boss and founder of the law firm. And we also have some small appearances by John Leguizamo, who's the convenience store robber. And we also have James Redhorn as Dr. Sultan. And believe it or not, JJ even makes a little cameo as the delivery boy. And basically the film's plot kind of focuses around Harrison Ford's character, Henry Turner. He's a very wealthy and successful Manhattan lawyer, and he's just, he's very determined, focused, ambitious, but he's also very callous and narcissistic and at times a bit unethical. And he's able to, in the very beginning, we see how he wins this one little malpractice suit, defending the hospital against a plaintiff who is basically, who makes these claims, but he's unable to prove that he warned the doctors about a particular pre-existing condition. Eventually, Henry wins the case. But we also see that he has very little patience, and just acts with very with intense, controlled kind of anger, especially towards his daughter, who I guess she spilled something, and he acted very upset about that, and actually told her she is not to leave that room for a pretty good while. And they go out to a party. He comes back. And Rachel's mother, Sarah, who is portrayed by Annette Bening, feels like he should make an apology to her. And he somewhat does, but he also says, but he did it with reason. And then you see his narcissistic side when he starts kind of beating his chest, where he's like, Daddy won a big case today, very successful. So he kind of somewhat apologizes, but not to an extent. He's kind of very short with that. He tries to, in a way, justify his reasons, and I guess you can see why he's not exactly a likable character. And then apparently he's trying to, find cigarettes, and he goes into a convenience store because he, doesn't have any cigarettes. Unfortunately, he interrupts a robbery in the process. That's where you see John Leguizamo in this one scene. Apparently, when he, doesn't, want to hand over his wallet, he gets shot, and the result is that the bullet hits the frontal lobe. In the other, he's actually shot twice. One hit bullet, like I said, hits the frontal lobe. One bullet hits the subclavian artery. It causes excessive internal bleeding and cardiac arrest, and it eventually results in brain damage. Luckily, he survives it, but he can't really talk or move, and he suffers retrograde amnesia. So he's forced to kind of undergo a lot of movement and speech with the help of a physical therapist, which is portrayed by Bill Nunn, and he does a really great job. I think him and Ford are really the heart of the film, to be honest. And even though we slowly get to, get to know Annette Bening's character a little better, and as good as an actress she is, I feel like the real heart of the film is with them. So eventually, with the help of Bradley, he's able to at least start to regain, his speech and movement slowly but surely. Like we see scenes of him using a walker. We also see scenes where he has to kind of practice his speech and say ball. There's actually a scene where we see Bradley, in order to get him to talk, he gets some breakfast, but he decides to, spice up the fried eggs with some Tabasco sauce and some kind of chili powder that we see to get him to talk. And I'll definitely, roll that footage pretty soon. But it really shows kind of like the really unique bond and chemistry that Ford and Nunn share in these scenes that I'm about to show you. So let's roll that footage.
Here you go.
Thank you. It looks fine. All right, listen. Since you're still not making any noise, I'm choosing the menu. When you start to talk, you can pick. Eggs Bradley. Made them myself. Hope you like them. What's wrong? Don't like my eggs? What? Okay. Okay, I heard you. Don't be pretending you can't talk. Listen, if you don't speak, I don't know what you want. All you gotta do is tell me anything you want. All you gotta do is make the call. This is like room service here, man. You ever been to a hotel? So what do you want, cheeseburger? Huh? No. You like caviar and shit like that, right? Cool, man. Just tell me you want caviar. Come on, say caviar. Caviar. What? Come on, man, say it.
Ritz.
Ritz? You want some crackers? You can have anything you want. You want some crackers? A Walkman for a walking man. Wow. When you get home, I want you to listen to this and think of your friend Bradley.
Am I gonna see you?
Yeah.
Promise.
Hell yeah, I promise.
Okay, bye.
Thanks.
Hey, it's what I do. High five.
Bye.
Bye.
Like I said, very good chemistry between our two male actors here. Harrison Ford and Bill Nunn really play well off of each other. Bradley recognizes that Henry is struggling because despite the fact that Henry has come a long way, like regaining his physical therapy and his ability to speak again, he's still struggling to remember anything. He doesn't remember his wife, daughter, his friends, or his occupation before the shooting incident. So in order to really, get to push Henry to really, gain any kind of semblance of a life, he does suggest that Henry goes home because these are the people that love him and care about him. And you have to really take these necessary steps to really show that that you can function in society. And I like how Bradley kind of pushes that onto him. But what in fact kind of convinces Henry to go home is when he has a moment with his daughter in his room, and his daughter Rachel helps him tie his shoes, and he asks her where she learned how to do that, and she tells him he taught her that, and somehow he remembers gray carpet. He tells Sarah and Bradley this. Eventually he leaves, but not before seeing that moment with him and Bradley where anytime you listen, he gives him the Walkman. Henry asks if he will see Bradley again, which I will upload that clip because you do see him one more time. And he basically, reveals a little bit more about himself and a certain also life-altering event that changed Bradley's life in a way. So when we see Henry return home, we see him slowly and surely kind of adjust, but it's somewhat of a struggle. Like he still doesn't like eggs, even though both Sarah and Rachel tell him he does. And he decides he wants to, leave without telling anyone. He ends up buying a puppy. And also, he also has a scene with Rachel when they're at the public library, and Rachel is reading a book, working on something. Henry starts flicking some paper balls at Rachel, and Rachel calmly tells him, start reading your book. Henry reveals he can't do that because apparently he never got the time to do all that, or he seems to struggle at that. But eventually, Rachel does teach Henry how to read again. Like there's a moment where he's able to read the title of Are You My Mother? He starts reading Ajax. He celebrates that moment. We also see that eventually Henry does in fact return to work out of kind of deference to his previous contributions because he was pretty successful and he was very well liked by the professionals, especially by Donald Moffat's character Charlie and the admiration of his co-workers. But they definitely noticed a change in Henry they understand that maybe it's going to be a slow adjustment. Like there's a brief little scene where he forgets to say whenever his secretary is pouring his coffee, and she almost overspills it, and she tells him, when you've had enough, you say when. And eventually he kind of uses that phrase with her in a later scene. And we see that even though he's not doing as much work there, he's just doing much less, but apparently he starts to actually look back to his previous case, which was the malpractice claim suit. He starts to realize that maybe something was not right about it, and that they were actually he was wrong to kind of rule in favor of the hospital, even though the patient did tell the doctor he was diabetic, which definitely plays into later in the film as well. Of course, his co-workers, Linda and Bruce, just brush it off. And so eventually, while this is going on, while Henry is also, rebuilding a bond with his daughter and growing close, unfortunately, she has to be sent away to a boarding school. Henry doesn't want her to go, but his wife Sarah thinks it might be good for her, good for the education. And so she is eventually dropped off there. While that's happening, both Henry and Sarah, grow closer and rekindle their romance, something they had previously before Henry became successful and wealthy and before he became self-absorbed and narcissistic and just impatient. So they start having some tender moments. Like there's a moment where we see them they had publicly kissed, and apparently Sarah told Henry that apparently before this happened he didn't like displaying public affection, but he didn't mind anymore. And eventually one of Sarah's old friends sees them and invites them to a party, and while they're there, apparently Sarah's that same person, Phyllis, who's, I forget what the actress name is, Robin Bartlett, they basically kind of mock him. They basically mock him, or not mock him, but kind of his friends make derogatory comments about him, and eventually they learn who they're not really friends, and just mainly just socialites that don't really give a shit. But somehow this really kind of brings Henry into a funk, and eventually that's when Bradley comes back into play. He reveals a little bit more about himself and kind of gives Henry kind of the extra push to really make a life-altering decision that's best for him and probably for his family. So but before he can do that, he eventually receives a kind of a gift from Bruce. And then eventually, when he recognizes the blue paper, the blue envelope, because apparently before this happened, when he returned home, he knows this earlier, but he didn't understand this. But when he was able to slowly regain some of his intellectual aspect of his intellectual intelligence and ability to figure all that out, he's able to put two and two together. And eventually, he finds out that his wife was actually having an affair with Bruce. He's very upset. He leaves. He actually goes to his office to get some stuff, and then he actually goes to a hotel, which turns out to be Ritz. And that's how Henry somehow that's why Henry blurted out, because he has actually been there. And eventually, while he's in this room, apparently Linda meets up with him and reveals that she followed him, because apparently it turns out that both Henry and Linda also had an affair, and it was in fact going to leave Sarah for her before his incident. And so by this, apparently Henry feels overwhelmed. He walks around, he sits on kind of a wooden bench in some kind of park, kind of ponders for some time, and then eventually I'm guessing because he went down that office and it was apparently the documents that were related to that malpractice suit. So eventually he makes amends by giving the evidence to the plaintiff from his previous case, and he apologizes and says that he's changed. And eventually, because of all this, he decides he wants to have a really great life. He didn't like who he was before. He doesn't like eggs. He hates being a lawyer, and as a result, he eventually quits that job, says goodbye to everyone, and he wants to be a family again. So they decide they're going to go get Rachel out of that school, and Rachel's really overjoyed. So Rachel, and Sarah leave, and that's pretty much the ending of the film right there. And I'll definitely show these very, those clips that that really determine what kind of direction and what kind of life-altering decision Henry goes, and I'll upload those clips in just a moment.
Mother. Mother?
Mother, you did it!
Are you my mother?
I can read. Sarah! Rosella! I can read. I can read. Ajax. This is Ajax.
Yes!
I can read. I can read.
What happened?
She taught me how to read. This is Ajax.
That's great!
I can read.
My knees, they're bad. Ask me why.
Why?
Football. Wrecked them both playing college football. Man, that was my life. Football? What else was there? Not jack shit. Homecoming, right? That son of a bitch threw a perfect spiral, and I caught it. Boom. Right out of the sky. I had the moment. When that safety hit me, and I felt my knees pop, I knew that was it. Game over, forget it. I was dead. My life was over, Hank. Now ask me if I mind having bad knees.
You mind?
No. No way. It was a test. I had to find a life. The therapist that helped me walk again, he was so cool, I thought, that's what I want to do. When I told some of my buddies, they laughed right in my face, called me a nurse, bought me white dresses and shit. But check it out. You're walking. You're talking. You're sitting here drinking some pretty expensive damn beer. I had something to do with that. If it weren't for my knees, I'd never have met you. So no, I don't mind having bad knees, no. Let me tell you something, Hank. Don't listen to nobody trying to tell you who you are. It might take a while, but you'll figure yourself out.
I missed your first 11 years, and I don't want to miss any more.
It's good to see you doing so well, Mr. Turner.
Thank you. Excuse us.
Alrighty, so final thoughts on this overall. Based on the clips that you saw, I'm going to say this. The strongest aspect about this film was definitely the acting, the characters themselves. I like the score definitely fit in some parts. The flaws to this, I'm going to be honest, I think honestly the part where Henry gets shot, I felt like that could have been better directed. It felt like it was a little awkward looking back. And while Henry, becomes, eventually a better person and starts making amends, I find that to be maybe somewhat semi-unrealistic, because I don't know if that would ever happen in real life. Maybe it's possible, but maybe that's one of the flaws I have. But like I said, the strongest aspect in this film lies with the chemistry between Harrison Ford and Bill Nunn, who is sadly no longer with us. And another actor, before I get into anything further, James Redhorn, the doctor you saw, he's sadly no longer with us. Both passed away some years ago. So rest in peace to both those actors. But anyways, like going back to Harrison Ford and Bill Nunn, I like how they really developed their rapport with each other. We later learned that Bradley's character, definitely had a life-altering event, as you saw in the clip. He didn't give a shit. He was a football star, didn't give a shit about anything else. And then when a safety blew out his knee, his life changed, and it probably became the best thing, because he began to know who he was. He became a better version of himself, just like Henry became a better version of himself in his own way, even if he, can't physically do all the things or think in a very highly intellectual way like he did before. But it shows how the character grows from that. We also see how he really reconnects with Annette Bening's character, who is herself a good actress, and she does well for the scenes that she's in. Same with Mikki Allen. I think this was a fairly solid debut for a young actress. And this sadly was her only film because, like I said before, she didn't do anything else after this, or anything before this as well. And I don't know if she's still acting or not, but Mikki Allen, great job for you. And plus, it's kind of nice to know that you lived in Texas too, so that's kind of cool. But I just wanted to give you a little quick shout out on that. If you're ever watching this review, I think you did a great job for such a young actress at the time. And Bill Nunn, really, he nailed it as Bradley. He did a great job as the physical therapist. He really showcased how how helpful he was, not just from the physical part, but also, giving him good advice as to how, you may have a life-changing incident, but you know what, don't let that define who you are. You can always be a better person. You can learn from this. You can always don't let it, like you said, don't let anyone tell you who you are. You can become something better. You're not them. You are you. You can choose who you want to be. If you didn't like who you were, do something different about it, And I kind of like that approach right there. And surprisingly, it was well written by J.J. Abrams, and I felt like, I kind of take back, if he does stuff like this, like written some kind of, drama like this, or like historical drama like he did with Forever Young, he actually would be a good writer. But unfortunately, he chose to go into the science fiction aspect, and I feel like it's definitely not for him. Just to be humble about it. So yeah. But and the score by Hans Zimmer, it definitely hits on the right notes. It may be a synth-based score, and but it works for all the emotional moments whenever Henry and Sarah are reconnecting. We also I like how it shows how Henry's going through his physical rehab, and also when he realizes that he has to quit his job because it's not for him anymore. It doesn't fit him. And there was other flaw that, looking back, I felt like maybe when Bradley used the Tabasco and the chili powder to get him to talk, I felt like could have gotten a better way for him to talk, but it is what it is. And this was actually a solid script by J.J. Actually, I take it back. It's actually a good script. Like I said before, if he did stuff more like this, I think he'd actually be a good and capable writer, but he chose not to go in this direction, I guess, after this and Forever Young. But what can I say? And not only that, this was actually semi-based on a true story, a particular individual. It's from what I've watched in an interview with Ford. He revealed that this was based on a highly educated Princeton lawyer who had, his focus was work, tennis, and family. And apparently a car accident kind of changed all that, and he became a much different person. It took him a good while to recover. It took maybe months to a year, for him to even, walk and talk again. But I like how Ford nailed that down. He did a really great job of getting all those aspects down, showing how, how much of a wealthy but very narcissistic and kind of impatient individual he was, and he became this. And then when the shooting accident happened to him, not shooting accident, but shooting incident happened, he became a much different person. And I like how this character growth. I don't think it's manipulative like the critics say. Critics apparently didn't like this film, but nevertheless, it did pretty decent at the box office. From what I read, the budget was somewhere like 25 million, made roughly around 43. So it was a modest hit. It wasn't a huge hit, but it was a decent enough success. My next review is actually going to be a very interesting film. It's similar to this. It's an amnesia-related film, but unfortunately, that one was least successful. And not only that, Ford actually starred with this actress that's in this film, Greta Saki. He actually starred with her in a previous film before this called Presumed Innocent. He was actually a lawyer for a good majority of that film. Thankfully, in here, he was only a functioning lawyer for like maybe 5-10 minutes at most. But now I'm going to be discussing Greta Saki in this next upcoming film called Shattered, which you'll definitely will see the preview for. And overall, I definitely enjoyed this film. I think it's, like I said before, well acted, has a great heart to it. Has especially the chemistry between Bill Nunn and Harrison Ford really work, and his chemistry was with Benning's decent, but I feel like it's not quite the heart of the film. But despite a few little, nitpicks I have with the film, it's definitely a watchable film. I definitely would recommend it. I definitely would recommend getting the Blu-ray too if you ever get the chance. And there you go. So anyways, that's going to do it for me on this review. And stay tuned for my next review, which I briefly mentioned. And here's a sneak peek of it.
Between the secrets of the past,
Your wife's been covering up for you all along.
And the perils of the present.
Oh, am I going crazy here?
Is the nightmare you can't afford to forget. Your wildest dreams can't prepare you for the ending of Shattered. Rated R. Starts Friday, October 11th at a theater near you.